Hello, it's Mary Jane here from Home for the Harvest, and today's video is all about garden planning. I'm planning out 2 big garden beds today for annual veggies, and I thought I'd make a video and show you how I do that. So there's a few steps for garden planning. You gotta know where you're going to be gardening, have some kind of an idea of what you like to eat, what you want to grow. You probably need a cup of tea. Very important. Yeah, so let's get started. So the first thing about garden planning is to determine your goal for the area. So for this garden that I'm planning, it's pretty much all about tomatoes and greens, because those are the 2 things that I really enjoy and that our family really enjoys in the summertime. So I think I'm going to do an entire bed of tomatoes and an entire bed of greens, and keep it simple. So the next thing to think about is, what resources you need to help you. So tomatoes and greens are 2 really common things to grow in an annual veggie garden. The garden centers here have been really helpful with the different varieties. The library has tons of great books and ebooks about tomatoes and growing tomatoes in particular. I read quite a few of them this winter, and they are really helpful. I did write an article on my blog, just a basic how to grow tomatoes article that has some of those tips that I found while I was researching this winter, and so I'll link to that in the description. But yeah, just think about what resources you have. Everything from Twitter and Facebook to hard copy books to the internet and YouTube. There's tons of places where you can get help growing your veggies. Number 3 is gardening zone. So figure out your growing zone if you don't know it already. I'm in zone 5. We have cold winters, it's snowy and cold, and then we have hot summers where it's t-shirt weather. So it's really nice to have a clear picture of what the seasons look like in your area in mind before you start planning, really planning out your beds. So if you're moved to a new place or you just don't remember, do a little bit of research, ask around, and figure out what growing zone you're in. I have an article about that too, and that will really help guide you if you're wanting to grow anything that doesn't like the cold, like tomatoes. So that is tip number 3. Tip number 4 is you want to think about what kind of garden, what type of garden. And by type of garden, I mean the actual structure. So are you growing just in beds in the ground, like just the soil that's out there? Are you just growing veggies in a bunch of little planter pots around the deck? Or are you growing in big raised beds? So they're all great. They all have their own benefits and drawbacks. These beds that I'm planning today are going to be raised beds, it's just a nice, I really like to grow veggies in raised beds. You get the benefits of containers. They don't dry out so fast. I really do like raised beds. They warm up quickly in the spring, certainly quicker than the soil in the ground. And it's just a nice height to work at. Keeps everything all organized. So I really do recommend raised beds. But if you're using containers or in-ground, those are great too. And I still grow tons of veggies in both of those structures as well. Okay, now we're on to the real fun stuff about planting the garden. We've thought about all the kind of the basics, but now it's time to choose crops and figure out how many plants we need and where they're going to go and all that fun stuff. So the first thing to really do is choose your crops. So for me, I always try to grow crops in these raised beds that are right by the house, try to grow crops that we're going to be eating like every day, things that we love. And in our family, that's tomatoes and greens. So those are the things that we are always using. So I already know that's what I want to grow. I am getting more and more particular about the kinds of tomatoes I grow, though. There's an article on my site about the tastiest kinds of tomatoes, and everyone's taste buds are different, but these are some of the more popular kinds. This year in the raised beds, I'm thinking I have some seedlings for Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Sun Gold. Sun Gold is like a little cherry tomato that's orange, that's so tasty, and Brandywine and Cherokee Purple are those more bigger heirloom kind of beefsteak meaty guys. So those plants won't make as many tomatoes, but the tomatoes will be hopefully quite big. Sun Gold will be ready quite soon since they're small. I think I would like to grow a green tomato just for fun, just because I think the kids would like it. So maybe green zebra. And I've never grown mortgage lifter, and so I think I'd like to grow mortgage lifter. And definitely aroma or two maybe. I also kind of slip a few peppers in there with the tomatoes, so I will refer to it as the tomato bed, but I think I'll put 2 shorter pepper plants on the one end there. The peppers and tomatoes have some similarities as plants, and they're totally different in other ways, but I'm fine grouping them in the same bed. I do have pepper plants that are going to be shorter though than these crazy tomatoes. I'm growing all indeterminate tomatoes. I don't think there's any determinate, any short kind of like bushy ones. I think I'm growing all the crazy vining types. So yeah, basically all really tasty kinds of tomatoes is the crops that I want to grow. For greens, I think I've got my seeds already for greens. So I'm growing just a plain looking lettuce. This is Little Gem. These are burpee Little Gem lettuce seeds. So super plain looking lettuce. Lettuce mix. This is from Seeds of Change. Arugula. We like arugula. It's kind of fun. It's really nice on top of a pizza too. It's beautiful. We don't eat too much of it, so I won't go overboard on this one. But hopefully grow some of it. And then kale, which we do eat some of fresh, but we also put a lot of it in smoothies. So yeah, I feel good about these greens. Got smoothies covered, salads, pizza. Okay, so now I like to write them down at this point because I can't keep all that straight. Yes. So this is the garden planner that I made a few years ago, and I have it on my site as a download, so you can download it, or you can just use graph paper or a different garden planner if you have one that you already like. I used to just plan my gardens on graph paper. You could use plain paper, you could use watercolor, whatever is your thing. I like to use a planner, and this is one that I've just made that has the pages that I want, but everyone has different tastes in terms of a garden planner. Some people will print out a few different garden planners and put them in a binder and just take the pages they want from different planners, and that's great. So find whatever way works for you. But pre-made planner is a good way to start if you're kind of starting from nowhere, or a book, or just get a book, like a gardening book, or the articles on my website or any gardening website that are about garden planning can be helpful. So I'm going to write down my crops, make sure that I don't forget anything. Okay, so tomatoes are number 1. So tomatoes are number 1. desired characteristics, tasty. And I don't quite know how many plants. Probably definitely less than 10. Crop peppers. Just a couple of them for salads. Desired characteristics. Yeah. For the peppers, I think I'll grow one pepper that's kind of an interesting kind that we can't buy at the store. But I'd also like to grow just a plain bell pepper. I want the kids to be able to see what the bell peppers that grow at the store, what the bell peppers at the store, how they would grow if they were in a garden, which I'm not sure that. So number 2 is peppers. And I think this year I'm going to grow an interesting kind of pepper that I haven't grown before. It's always fun to try something new. But I also want to grow a super normal looking bell pepper that looks like the ones that we get from the grocery store. And I want to do that because, we're always buying these bell peppers from the grocery store in the winter, and I want the kids to be able to see what they look like and that you can grow them yourself. So I'm going to be growing the most normal looking bell pepper I can find. So desired characteristics, grocery store type. Okay, greens. So plain green lettuce, got green gem. So green lettuce. Just nice salad greens, nice salad greens that will be that won't wilt immediately and that will stand up nicely in a salad. Lettuce mix. I just like to have a few of those different colors and different looking leaves. I think that's kind of fun. So lettuce mix. Also for salad, arugula. That is definitely not how you spell that. Pizza, salad. And then there was one other thing. Kale. Okay. Desired characteristics. Again, it would be great if it kind of looks like it does when we buy it at the grocery store. I think it's really nice for the kids to see that we can grow these things that we buy. So, and that's why I've picked the one that I've picked. I've picked dwarf green curled kale, which is like a really small kind of a Scotch curly kale. And they're easy to grow. The plants don't get too big. They're really good in containers or raised beds. And they're really cold hardy for us, which is nice here because we are in zone 5, so it does get a little chilly. Okay, so in my head I was going to grow 2 things, but now I'm growing 6 things. It's tomatoes and peppers and greens, so it's pretty much 2 things. Okay, so now I want to get clear on exactly how many plants I need. Sometimes I've just gone to the garden center and bought whatever I wanted and hoped I've had enough room for it. Or I've had to go back and get more. I haven't purchased enough seeds or seedlings. But that's not really an option this year, so I want to get super clear exactly what's going to go in this bed so that as soon as the nights aren't so cold, we can get them planted out and get going. So I already know the size of this garden that I'm planning out. So it's not a new garden I'm making, so I'm starting from what size it is and what I can fit in there as opposed to what I want to grow and then designing a garden to be that size. So I have 2 beds that are each 33 square feet. So they're 11 feet long and they're by 3 feet. So I find 3-foot beds, like a 3-foot width, to be really nice because you can reach into the middle. 4-foot beds are really common. I think they're probably more common than 3-foot wide raised beds. I prefer 3-foot wide, but I'm not very tall and I don't have very long arms. So, okay, so I've got 2 of these beds, so 66 square feet. One of these beds I know is in the sun, and one of them is partial sun. So definitely that one will be for the greens. I want the tomatoes to get all the sun they can. So I'm going to draw out my beds on this map. I am going to check out the seed packets for the greens, and I'm just going to take my list and figure out what I need to buy. Okay, so I have just the rough outlines of the beds marked out. I've got I know how big they are. They're kind of to scale. I know where north is. So that's really the basic place to start. I'm going to mark in where the hose is. These beds do have drip irrigation, but I think that's going to be changing up a little bit. So I won't mark that in. Yeah, time to start laying out some crops. So I know that this bed here is in full sun. So I'm just going to designate this the tomato bed. And this bed here is partial sun, and I'm going to designate that the greens bed. I find when I make them super simple like that, that works well for me. Some people love to interplant, and I think that's great too, especially if you have like a square foot garden where you've got kind of wooden dividers between every square foot. That's really nice, and that makes it easier to do more varied stuff. But with how crazy things are around here, I just am going to have a plain tomato bed and a plain greens bed, and I'll keep everything simple for everybody. So let's mark them out. Oh, and another thing to think about is there anything in the beds already? So this one sunny bed just does have a corner of overwintered garlic. So I'll just have to work around that. It's just a very skinny row. I try to put the garlic at the edge of the bed because I know that I like to put bigger sun plants like tomatoes and peppers in a little bit so that they've got room to bush out without totally taking over the pathways and getting crazy. And they usually don't need that trellising, those support systems right at the beginning. And I like to take garlic out, end of June, beginning of July. So usually that's about the time that the tomatoes are starting to really need some support. So yank out the garlic and you can fill in that little area of support. Okay, so now I know I'm growing really big, crazy tomato plants. So I do have the seeds for Brandywine around here somewhere. This is one of the types that I'm growing. And they're recommending a 2-foot spacing, a 24-inch spacing. And I think that's probably reasonable. I could grow them closer to each other. I could grow them more farther apart. But I think that's probably reasonable. But since I'm going to do this entire bed in tomatoes, I don't think I'll do every single 24 inches and be all obsessive about it. I think I'm just going to do them in kind of a W shape down the bed. So I'm going to mark them out. I'm going to start in 1 foot because of the 24-inch spacing that I know is going to work out well. I want to leave 1 foot around the center of each plant. So you've got this 24-inch spacing, but the center of the plant is, you've got 12 inches out from the center on both directions. So I am going to start a foot in. So I've just made a dot a foot in, and that's where I'm going to put one of my tomatoes, and I'm going to go down in a W shape down the bed because it's 3 feet wide. So I'm going a foot from one side and then a foot from the other side, foot from one side, foot from the other side. And I'm putting a plant. I am putting a plant every foot because so you don't really get 2 feet in that one orientation, but there's a lot of room around them. And I'm not terribly concerned about there not being a lack of air circulation because of the way that I'm spacing them, and there's only going to be really this one undulating row of tomatoes. Okay, so I've got my 10 little dots on the map. Let's get so that's where I'm going to put my plants. Yeah, I think I'll do two of them as peppers, not tomatoes. So I'll just put little P's by them. I'll put little T's by the tomatoes. You can get really fancy if you like and color code and just shade the area. So I'm going to make the tomato area kind of red, the pepper area purple, purple peppers. Okay, so I have room in this pattern that I've drawn out for myself for 8 tomatoes. Now if I was super set on growing 12 tomatoes, I could make them fit. There is definitely room to grow more tomatoes in here if I got creative, but more is not always better. I find when I have a few well-tended plants, and like 8 tomato plants is still a lot of tomato plants. But I find that when I have fewer well-tended plants, I'm actually getting more produce than if I had a bunch of plants that were kind of all getting some haphazard attention. So I think 8 plants is totally good for us, and then the 2 pepper plants in that one bed, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to do 2 Brandywine. I'm going to do 2 Cherokee Purple. Okay, so now I'm going to write that down so I don't forget it. So my tomatoes, Cherokee, 2 Brandywine, 2, and I have seedlings for Brandywine and Cherokee Purple, so I've got 4 of those. I said I wanted to do a green one, maybe green zebra, Roma, mortgage lifter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I need one more, so I get to pick one more tomato. Maybe pineapple, I don't know. Okay, so 8 tomatoes, so that we're good on that. I know I'm going to grow for peppers. I'm going to grow 1 unusual pepper and 1 super normal looking bell pepper. So I know this part is planned out now. So I can write that down on my shopping list, although I already have some tomato seedlings. So you can grow your own tomato seedlings from seeds. And I have done that for another garden, but you have to start really early, and you have to be on it in terms of buying the seeds early enough that they can be shipped to your house so that you can get your seedlings started and then be potting them up into bigger. So it is a time investment, and tomato seedlings are not actually that expensive. So you can usually find them for like $2 or $3. The problem with seedlings is it's usually harder to find the types you want. So it's a lot easier to find Brandywine seeds than it is to find a Brandywine seedling plant, at least in our area. The varieties available via seed packet are way more variety. But if you can find a nursery in your area that does have some of the more specialty varieties that you like of tomatoes, I think it's just great to just start from seedlings. There's no need to do this, especially if you trust some local pros to do it for you, unless you like it. I'm doing some tomatoes from seedlings for another garden with the kids, again, just so that they can see how tomato plants grow and be part of the process. I think they also planted some Cheerios in there too, so we'll be seeing if any Cheerio trees grow. Yeah, so that's seedlings versus seeds. Okay, so now when am I going to plant these? So I plant my tomatoes outside, definitely obviously after frost, but I don't like them to be out there when it's less than 10 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. I'll put it on the screen. That was just something that I read about, and they will live lower than 10. I just won't be happy about it. I was curious because I'd read about this, so I took one of my sun gold seedlings, and I've really only taken it in on the frosty nights. And then another one of my sun gold seedlings has been with everything else, and it's been coming in anytime that it's below 10 degrees, anytime the air is starting to get chilly. And you know, sure enough, it's only been 2 weeks of doing that, and the sun gold that's been coming in the house every night, like it's already got little baby tomatoes on it, and it's tall and happy. And the sun gold that's been outside almost every night, except for the really frosty ones, certainly it's alive, but it only has a couple flowers. It's not nearly as tall, and it's only been a couple weeks. It was kind of amazing to me how much the cold affected them. I wasn't, I'd read it, but it was interesting to just see it with two seedlings that looked the same at the start, and now the one is so much further along than the other. So I think it is a good idea to not let them outside when it's too cold. So just looking at the weather forecast, I think it's probably going to be at least another week or two before they go outside. So I'm gonna put May 15th for an outside planting date for my tomatoes and peppers, subject to it being warm enough, or the lows not being too low. I don't want it to be lower than 10 degrees Celsius. Okay, and so for the Brandywine, it's saying 75 to 100 days. It's for me, they usually take closer to the 100 days, maybe 90 days. I'll just estimate 90 days across the board for the big ones, and so that's because 90 days is easier to work with. 3 months from planting in the ground. So May 15th, May, June, July, August. So mid-August we should start to be having lovely big heirloom tomatoes, and of course before then we'll have all these sun golds. And that's a pretty normal start of harvest for gardens in our area. Obviously, the farms that have greenhouses are way earlier, and if you have a greenhouse, I'm jealous. But yeah, I'm happy with mid-August. We usually are kind of harvesting our tomatoes mostly from mid-August to mid-September, and with the big heirlooms, they're kind of already in a rush, so we're having tomato sandwiches every day for lunch, and certainly freezing quite a lot of it. So I'm excited for that. Okay, on to the greens. So I like to plant my greens in rows because it's easy with kids. And I usually put the rows north-south. So for me, that means that the rows are going to be like this. And I'm going to put a row down the center of every foot of the bed. So I'm just going to draw them in here. I just don't have the patience to like draw every little lettuce plant. Okay, so I have 11 rows. And I've got kale, arugula, lettuce mix, and then plain green lettuce. So because I have 11 rows, I think I'm going to do 5 of them with various lettuces, and then 3 each of arugula and kale. So the kale is going to be the tallest, so I'm going to put it on the east side. Kale, 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 arugula, no, I think I only need 3 rows of arugula. I don't need 4. So I'm going to do 3 rows of lettuce mix. 2 rows. I'm going to do 3 rows of the plain green, the green little gem burpee lettuce. Okay. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to have 5 rows of lettuce, 3 rows of arugula, and 3 rows of kale. Okay, so now I can use the seed packets to figure out what the spacing is on each of those. I usually only need 1 packet of each kind, but there may be, if you want to grow like a lot of lettuce or a lot of kale, you may be needing more than 1 packet, but usually 1 packet is totally fine for most home gardens. So I will do that. But I know that I have these already, so I don't need to add them to any lists. The spacings for these kind of things are usually pretty low. So kale, this kale wants to be like a foot apart. The lettuce wants to be an inch apart. And this lettuce wants to be thinned to 20 centimeters. And the arugula 3 inches. So I'm not going to get fussy and like draw all those onto my map. I'm just going to keep the packets with me, keep the seeds in the packets until it's time to plant. And because I have grown these before, I know that there's enough. But it does usually say on the packet. So it says 150 kale seeds, and I'm putting a kale seed every foot, and the bed is like only 3 feet wide. I'm not going to use 150 seeds. Okay, last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in the little schedule for these. Now, these are all kind of things that can be planted like pretty much any time. Now, yeah, for summer harvest start in April. That's good advice, I think. It's early May here already. You can say it says start in June for fall and winter harvest. So what's that? You can pretty much start kale anytime as long as it's warm enough for it to germinate. Yeah, so it's totally cool to plant all these greens now. So we'll get those in the ground and then we'll wait on the tomatoes for a couple more weeks for it to be warmer outside. Okay, so I have my map. I've got my crop list, like just my shopping list, and I've got my schedule, and I'm also going to write notes and stuff on the schedule too. Those are the last 2 pages of my garden planner if you're using my garden planner, but just make sure whatever kind of planner or loose leaf you're using, write down notes. It's really nice to have notes for each kind if you're going to grow it next year, or if you're going to decide that you don't like it. It's good to remember why. So got my map, so I'll use that planting. I already have the seeds for all my greens, and I have a couple of the tomatoes, but I know I'm going to need a total of 8 tomato seedlings and 2 peppers. So I'm going to go and get the rest of those. So I'll take a picture of my shopping list, and then my calendar. So I usually just put this on the fridge. So mine is 2 pages. I've got a page for the tomatoes and a page for the greens, and just put it on the fridge, and that'll keep me up to speed and remind me it's time to plant. And it's also nice to just write notes on there. You could say, you know, first harvest sun gold tomato, June 12th. I don't know. You can write down any notes you want. Some things I like to write down is I like to note the last frost date down there for the peppers and tomatoes. I also love to do first harvest date for fruiting plants. So for the peppers and tomatoes, what is the actual date that I am harvesting each one? My calendar has an estimated harvest date, and I write that in, but I always then confirm later on when is the first harvest date. Greens are a little different because you can pretty much harvest them at microgreens if you wanted to, but I do try to wait until they've reached full harvest size, and I note that date down too. Yield, it's nice to write down like how much you got. Some people like to count, you know, individual tomatoes, and some people like to do it by weight. I don't bother to weigh my tomatoes. I probably should. It would be interesting. But I usually just say, okay, this plant did 5 tomatoes or however many. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of tomatoes when they're small, and then the bigger plants, you might only get a handful of tomatoes. But the tomatoes might be a couple pounds. So, always different, and that's why you need notes. So be sure to write that down. I put mine on my fridge, but just put it somewhere that you'll remember to write down on a regular basis. Okay, so that is how I plan my garden out. I'm so fascinated to hear how other people are planning out their gardens. What books do you use? Do you use seedlings? Do you use seeds? What tricks have you picked up over the years? Are you growing new things every year? There are things you just can't not grow. So put your comments down in the comment section. Thank you so much for watching. If you like these kind of gardening videos, please subscribe to my channel. There's a button somewhere down there where you can subscribe, and YouTube will show you more of these kind of videos. And I also will put a link to where you can download my garden planner if you'd like to get my garden planner. It's free. It's just a PDF that you download. It gets emailed. The link gets emailed to you. And so I just hope that as many people as possible are planning out and getting their gardens going. So happy garden season, everybody. See you in the next video.